COVID-19 didn't ruin your child's school experience last year. It just forced you to see it.
Ready?
Hold on. Okay, we ready.
What's up? It's your girl, Dr. Tureka Louis, otherwise known as Dr. Lou, your partner in success and progress. I'm an education expert and consultant, and I help people and businesses succeed. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and hit that notification button so that you can be notified when I drop new content. I wanted to speak to you today about the notion that COVID-19 ruined this past school year and is set to do the same for the upcoming school year. If your last school year was terrible, it was not solely due to COVID-19, and it was not solely due to school closings. Now, there are a few exceptions to this. Seniors and parents of seniors, I get it. I get your disappointment here, and you may beg to differ with everything else I'm going to say in this video, and I totally understand why, because the truth of the matter is, I'm not talking to you right now. I do want you to listen because you will still get something out of the video, but I want you to understand that the situation I'm speaking to is not yours. I'm talking to everyone else. If your child is in grades K through 11 and you live in America, then I'm talking to you. So, what COVID-19 did for you was bring lots of challenges, but also it challenged a school system that was already struggling to keep up with the world around it. It was challenging a school system that was struggling to exceed average in global rankings, but it also brought each of your children and all of their responsibilities of their education home to you. It was no longer possible for you to just trust the so-called experts, believing that their academic experience was in good hand. Not just because you were doing the homeschooling or distance learning that you have been doing, but because there is no dropping your kid off at school since COVID-19 hit. And all the other activities that go with what happens after you drop your kid off at school, they kind of were changed, shifted, or paused for many parents. Because of that, we got to see things a little differently this year. Now, it is important to acknowledge that we are indeed experiencing a global crisis. We are experiencing a pandemic, and pandemics may come once in a lifetime or once in a generation, but really, you don't fathom what a pandemic is or its related experiences until you're in it. Reading in history books just doesn't do it justice. It can affect people in different ways, but it is a global catastrophe regardless of how you look at it, and it affects all of us. So whether you're among those swearing this was a plandemic, a political issue, or whether you're among countless others who say, look at the science, look at the numbers, people are dying, this is real. Either way, this phenomenon is directly impacting all of us in a major way. And people are being adversely impacted one way or another day to day. But that's not the problem in your child's education. Just know that your child may have been experiencing a mess all along, or at least subpar learning experiences that you couldn't see because it occurred behind a wall or gate or other barrier. But as a former educator, instructional leader, and instructional systems designer, as a builder of learning systems that work, someone who is experienced with public and private school education, someone who is taught in both physical brick and mortar classrooms as well as in the online digital platforms, I can tell you this for sure. The disaster that many of you experienced at the end of this past year was more likely due to the fact that schools were already failing your children. No discount to your discomfort. There were challenges all around, but some schools met those challenges with resilience and some did not. I communicated with parents across the U.S. and in the European Union just to get their take on their child's education experience in light of this pandemic, and there was a common thread in many of their responses. Strong schools remain strong, and simply shifted their efforts to making sure students were successful by embracing a new platform and a different mode of interaction. They adapted from brick and mortar learning to online learning. They devoted systems, resources, and tools, and they made sure that they were quickly made available to support students and families. Yes, times were challenging. Yes, teachers faced learning curves. Parents were working from home and caring for kids all day, and that's a lot. On top of this, they were expected to demonstrate a unique vigilance regarding their child's education on a day-to-day basis that they had not been expected to demonstrate before. Having said that, many of the challenges that we like to attribute to this whole phenomenon were existent in the classroom, even though it was in a different form, a different setting. For instance, one of the complaints was not all kids have access to internet, and if they do, it's not fast enough and they don't have the proper equipment. Well, not all kids had the books and other devices that they needed to learn in the classroom either. And that's the whole point. It's like some of this stuff has been said before, some of it hasn't, but one thing is sure, we are now all keenly aware of certain issues that are prevalent and relevant as it relates to educating kids because we've seen them up front firsthand. Do not discount them and blame it all on the pandemic. Your child needs more than that. The truth of the matter is, in this unique space that parents found themselves functioning in lately, many parents felt like they were failing and they struggled to deal with those feelings. And I say to those parents, I understand, but I also say for many parents, welcome to your child's world because they were experiencing the same thing in school and didn't know how to verbalize it. Even students who do fine grade-wise may not have been reaching their full potential or receiving the services needed to support their doing so before the pandemic. Now, there are a few points I want to recognize in all of this. Before I get to those points, I just want you to know one thing. There is good news. Kids are super resilient and they adjust and they rise to the occasion in challenging times. They often find ways to succeed or cope when they need to. And the question is, how are we going to use all of that to help them now? And how are we going to use all of that to make sure that their learning experience is now better on the other side of COVID-19 and maybe even during COVID-19 than it was before? The bottom line is, how are we going to use all of this to help our kids? Point one, if your child was expected to show up to a disorganized live lesson online every week this past school year, chances are they were expected to show up to a disorganized classroom before the pandemic. Because of busy lifestyles, it's easy to drop off your child at that school gate and have no idea what's going on all day and what they do all day. And then we chalk it up to how was your day at the end of the day when the kid gets home, and the kid gives us what they can remember or maybe no answer at all. But that's not really enough for us to really have an understanding of what's going on as it relates to their education and how we can help them. I'm not saying that the classroom is not at all better than some of the distance learning options that your children have been receiving, but being in the classroom doesn't make learning content more engaging, doesn't make it more interesting, and it alone does not make teaching more effective. Now, for those of you that will argue that good teachers do all these things, make things more engaging and more interesting and all that other wonderful stuff, a good teacher will also adapt to new platforms in order to remain effective and to work for the highest good of their students and themselves. So if a teacher is good enough to make things interesting in the classroom, they can develop the necessary skill sets to be engaging distance educators if they're dedicated to the cause. Point two, if the work your child was doing at home at the end of this last school year was just busy work, chances are they would have been doing busy work in the classroom as well at some point. They would have had their peers as a welcome distraction, but that doesn't negate the fact that they wouldn't have learned anything more. Point three, disorganized, miserable education experiences may indicate poorly functioning school systems, learning systems, or learning environments, right? It may also indicate, at minimum, ill-prepared educators. These things are easy to mask in a familiar setting, filled with peers ready to help you distract yourself, break the monotony through social interaction. Furthermore, there are many kids who can just about teach themselves anything. So grades may not even be the best indicator as to whether or not the child is really getting the education experience and support to fulfill their fullest potential. The bottom line is this: you have a major decision to make this year. Contrary to what you've been told, you have choices, and the stakes are very high, and your decisions will set the playing field for your child. Now you may say, duh, Captain Obvious, I knew all of that. But the screams that I have heard since this pandemic impacted schools indicates to me that maybe many are not as aware as they think they are that they have these choices, or they're not applying it as they could. There were schools that did just fine. I want to reiterate that, because that means that if your school didn't, I'm not necessarily saying that we cancel that school or walk away from it altogether, but you should at least expect or demand that they rise to the occasion in the coming school year and tell you how they're going to be more resilient and how they're going to deal with this pandemic. The stakes are very high. Your decisions right now will set the playing field for your child's adult life. Many midlife crises are initiated or averted based on the preparation that the individual receives in childhood for life, work, and relationships in adulthood. So no pressure, right? But fulfillment, disappointment, success, failure, stability, or instability as an adult all rely heavily on preparation as a child for life, as facilitated by their learning experience, their school, and the other tools provided for them by the parents. That's you. So schools that were already top-notch, they adapted this past school year, and they will continue to adapt. As a matter of fact, they will be even more prepared because they've had more time to estimate some of the disruptions that may be experienced, because COVID-19 isn't gone yet. And the parents that I spoke with, they were overwhelmed just like every other parent. But those parents that had good, strong schools to rely on had support. And they knew it. And they felt it. And it made things better for them and their child. Now, the parents that were complaining the most thought they had an education solution until COVID-19 removed the smoke and mirrors, dropped the curtain, and removed the mask. When the masks fell off, those schools that had been failing or struggling or faking it before COVID-19 did so even more in light of the pandemic. And that's going to worsen as we proceed and the crisis continues or is resolved. As you make decisions for the coming school year, it's important for you to remember a few things. Tip number 1, don't expect things to get back to normal. Some of the changes that you have seen in this past school year as it closed were coming anyway, because the world was already shifting. The workforce was already shifting. Many school systems did not evolve or keep up. Colleges were already shifting due to the changing landscape in the workforce and their close proximity to it. Job training programs were already shifting. Yet many K-12 students only required students to take one online course before they graduate. They were being prepared for a vocational landscape that faded away and that was continuing to fade away more rapidly than schools were willing to admit. Working online or incorporating web-based collaboration is not an extra or a luxury. It's not fancy. It's not futuristic. It is becoming more and more of a day-to-day occurrence and a reality in the workforce. And many of the tools that kids were forced to begin using during the last part of this past school year are going to help them to be more upwardly mobile as a job candidate. It's going to help them to get hired. I'm not saying all distance learning and education is equal. I am saying that some of the angst that we have been experiencing as a culture are due to the fact that we are shifting and changing in ways that we needed to. As a matter of fact, we learned in Change Management 101 that people don't like change. Change is uncomfortable and people tend to avoid it. And that's what we're seeing here. Some of what we experience is just resistance to change. Change is uncomfortable and most people try to avoid it. Tip number 2, don't wait for the school board to tell you what's going to happen next year. They may not be acting in your child's best interest. They may be acting in the best interest of the school system, which is fine. But you need to make sure that you get enough information so that you can act in the best interest of your child. If the school system doesn't seem poised to navigate the changing terrain that's going to come next year, you will be able to make the proper adjustments so that your child still has everything they need. I work with many students that chose a non-traditional education path. They are still getting diplomas and degrees or what have you. They're still getting into colleges, but what they chose not to do was be in the traditional classroom. And I can tell you that those students kept going. When the rest of the schools shut down during the pandemic, they were able to just keep right on flowing. They were able to just keep making progress. They were able to continue excelling. They were able to continue learning new things, and they closed out this past school year strong. Nothing changed for them. And if they had to go sit in a brick and mortar classroom next year, they would be able to do so, and they would be able to handle whatever was handed to them because they met all the standards of the grade before. So don't wait for the school board to tell you what it's going to do. Gather your information and decide what's in the best interest of your child, which brings me to tip number 3. Evaluate all of your options. Determine which schools or learning environments are going to be best for your family. Determine which ones are really prepared to be agile in the coming days ahead. Determine which option is going to be flexible, regardless of what happens with COVID-19 and all the challenges we may face and all of the related challenges that go along with that. Tip number 4, remember, you get to make this decision, and you are your child's best and sometimes only real advocate. Ask yourself every step of the way, am I making decisions that I'm going to feel good about when I look back on them in the future with my adult child? Tip number 5, reaching out for support is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. It's a sign that you're willing to do what it takes to give your child the opportunity that he or she deserves. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. Remember to subscribe for more information, encouragement, and the tools you need to plan your family's success path. Stay tuned to this channel for tools and resources to help you do your research and make the best decision right now. And again, thank you for watching. Until next time, it's your girl, Dr. Tureka Louis, otherwise known as Dr. Lou, your partner in success and progress, reminding you that I love you, I believe in you, and for now, I am out.